before I knew it, I had a criminal record with some felonies. And one day I met this attorney. He was my court appointed attorney. And he looked at me and he's like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your life? You seem pretty smart. Why are you doing this? Why are you always getting into trouble?" And he offered me a job as his secretary right on the spot. He was like, "Come work for me."
Law school taught you the law, but it didn't teach you this, how to connect. Be that one lawyer who shows up different, the one clients trust, the one they never forget. I'm Neal Goldstein, and this is That One Lawyer Podcast. Let's get started. Today's guest is a powerful example of what it looks like to rewrite your story and then use that story to lift other people. Stephanie Rodriguez Ruiz is a personal injury lawyer in Boston. Her path to the courtroom is anything but typical. Once a high school dropout with a felony record and a newborn on her hip, Stephanie didn't just get a second chance, she built one from the ground up. Today, she's not only an attorney advocating for her clients in personal injury and civil rights cases, she's also a mentor, a nonprofit co-founder, and a force for educational equity and youth empowerment. Whether she's fighting for Black educators in Boston public schools or leading a record-sealing clinic in her community, Stephanie is using her voice to make sure others get a shot as well. This is the story of how a woman who once thought that the law would not be for her decided to change what the law looks like for everyone else. Stephanie, welcome to That One Lawyer Podcast. And I must just say before we start that you're one of the youngest attorneys we've had on the show, but you've already lived, you fought, and you contributed more than most lawyers twice your age. So it's really not about age, it's simply about grit, and we're going to find out about your grit. And let me just tell you, I respect the hell out of it.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me. And it was really crazy to hear that introduction, because sometimes we don't even really think about what we've accomplished. We just live day to day. And to hear it spoken out like that is just, I don't know, it's a surreal feeling. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for being here. And I'm really happy that you're with us, and I'm happy that we're going to have this conversation. Stephanie and I met at one of the Lawyer Stories events, and we had these great conversations, and we've spoken on the phone a number of times about different things, and she's really an amazing person. Forget about the lawyer part. She's a great lawyer, but she's an amazing person, and she's done so much, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to get to all of it, but we're going to try and do the best we can. So Stephanie, why don't you start off by telling everybody your backstory, wherever you want to start, wherever you're comfortable, just let everybody know what your life was like before you became a lawyer.
Sure. So first of all, I grew up in a single parent household. I'm one of three, on my mom's side, and I grew up in Boston public housing, in Boston public schools. And so I never really thought that I was going to get far in life. My mom worked her behind off to support my sisters and I. And I was a troubled child from the very, very beginning. And actually, I was talking to someone about this the other day. I think I had my first fight in kindergarten. I mean, I was just I don't know, I was a bad kid, And throughout middle school and high school, I was just constantly getting into trouble. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe I just wanted attention or something. But I was always in trouble. And oddly, I would get good grades, but constantly in the principal's office, in detention, suspensions. And I got suspended a few times for fighting. I got kicked out of high school. And then I was transferred into another Boston public high school. Well, I'll go back. That first high school that I got kicked out of was Boston Arts Academy. And I was a theater major there. And you'll see why that's important. And then I was transferred to another high school, Charlestown High, where I was kicked out again for fighting. And then I just decided, that's it, I'm not going back. So I went down the wrong path, drinking, smoking, fighting, getting into trouble, getting arrested several times. And before I knew it, I had a criminal record with some felonies. And one day I met this attorney. He was my court appointed attorney. And he looked at me and he's like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you doing with your life? You seem pretty smart. Why are you doing this? Why are you always getting into trouble?" And he offered me a job as his secretary right on the spot. He was like, "Come work for me. You could be my secretary. I can't offer you much. You can you can come work part time." I'll never forget this lawyer. His name was Scott Curtis, and he offered me a job working for him part time. And he was a criminal defense attorney, and he handled a lot of big cases, murders, sexual assault cases. And although I was still getting in trouble a little bit, he did help me down the right path, and made me decide that I wanted to work in the legal field. And I think that's what kind of changed my life. At the time I was 18 years old. I met a man, and I was still, getting into trouble. We ended up getting married. I got married at 19 years old, and
Wow.
I had my son. I got pregnant with my son, my now 17-year-old son. And that's when I decided to make changes in my life, when I became a mom. And so I decided that I was going to, see if I could, I don't know, maybe get into the legal field. I didn't think I could be an attorney, but I thought, maybe I could be a paralegal, you know? And so I went to the Salter School to get a paralegal certificate, and then just everything just kind of took off. So I don't want to take over the whole conversation, but that's how it started.
No, no, it's really important because I think everything that you've told us so far, which isn't even everything, all comes back to you and where you are now. You can literally, I'm sure, if you sat and I'm sure you have thought about it, you could probably draw a line as to your whole life and how each of the things that you went through made you who the person who you are today. They all are related. And so, I think everything that you said was important. And so I guess it's a good segue into asking you, so you're a teenage mom, you have a felony conviction, and now you're a rising star as a lawyer in Boston. So how did the switch flip? I mean, how did you go from being that person? And I know you started to get into it, but can you be more specific? What was there one moment, or was it a series of moments where you said, you know what? I'm going to law school.
It's interesting because I went to the Salter School and I did the paralegal certificate. And in order to get into the Salter School, they said that you had to have a GED or a high
Right.
school diploma, and I didn't have either. And so I thought, well, let me try to get a GED. And I didn't take any classes or anything. I just said, oh, let me apply to take the test. So I went and I took the test and I passed immediately. And then I did the paralegal certificate. It was, I think, a 9-month program, and I just sailed through it. It was pretty easy for me, and I realized that I had a little bit of a gift. I was able to absorb information pretty quickly. I think it's more of my memory than anything, and so I thought to myself, well, geez, if this is pretty easy for me, why don't I go a little further? Why don't I try to get a bachelor's degree and see if I can get into law school? And that was it for me. It was my ability to grasp and understand these legal concepts at the paralegal level a little bit easier than some of my peers.
Yeah, I could relate again. Of course, my backstory very, very similar to yours. A high school dropout, had to start off in community college, right? And then said, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And then I went to a 4-year college, and then I made the decision to go to law school at night. And so, yeah, I could completely understand. And how was it for you transitioning into undergraduate school? Was it easy for you? Was it easy to relate to other students? Not talking about law school yet, just undergraduate school. How was that experience for you?
It's funny because I think that's why you and I click so well, because like we're like two peas in a pod, you and I.
Right.
Because I did the same thing. I started a 2-year program at Eastern Nazarene College. It wasn't necessarily a community college, but it was very similar. It had a night program where you only went one night a week.
Right.
It was extremely intense program, and I was like, I was like If you could transfer a bridezilla concept to a student, I was that. I was like, I had to get a 4.0. I was just so on top of my
Wow.
studies because I was only there one night a week, and I was a
Right.
mom, and I was working full time, right? And I'm taking care of my son, and I'm going to school at night, and I was getting A's. Just I was just churning out these A's, and I'm like, okay, I this is an associate's program. I want to transfer to a better university for my bachelor's. And once I was done with the program, I applied and I was accepted to Boston University. So I
Wow.
transferred to Boston University and still did their night program. That
Right.
was a little more difficult,
Right.
I will say, and the parking out there is horrible.
Right.
Not really meant for, I mean, I love BU, but it wasn't really meant for night students. I mean, it's really
Right.
meant for commuters. So I had to, I had to find parking, but thankfully the job that I had as a paralegal was in the Brighton area, so it wasn't too difficult. But yeah, I mean, that's what I did. I did it at night, and it took me way longer than the average person because at the time, and I don't think I've ever told you this, but at the time, so my oldest son, who's very open about this, he has probably like the worst case of ADHD you'll ever see.
Okay.
You know,
Right. Right.
poster child for it. He'll explain it so that anyone can understand.
Right.
At the time, he was having a really hard time in kindergarten and in first grade, and so I had to take time off because I had him in like intensive therapy. I was trying to figure out how to manage it. I was stressed out. I didn't know how to do it. I mean, he had gotten kicked out of a kindergarten. It was bad. So it was tough. It was a tough time, but I got through it.
And it's obviously at some point in undergraduate school, you made this unbelievable decision to say, okay, I'm going to go to law school. And you went through the application process. You obviously took the LSATs and you did well enough to go to law school. So tell me about that thought process. Well, in other words, when you first went to undergraduate school, did you say, all right, I'm going to do this and then go to law school? Or did that happen while you were going to undergraduate school? What was that like?
So I knew that I wanted to go to law school after undergrad. Like that was the plan. I was working at that point, I had been working at a personal injury law firm in Boston, and that was my plan. I did have a little bit of a mental setback because when I took the LSATs, I took a class before I took that. And I took the class at Boston College. And this is not what I'm going to say is not a dig at Boston College, but the class was about I think it was like a 2 month program, and I had paid for it out of pocket. And it was one of the very few times where I found myself in an environment that was very different. It was an all white classroom. BU was very diverse because they had a lot of international students, and Boston Public Schools was Boston Public Schools, right?
Right, right.
And so the classroom setting, it was just all white students. And I was the only person of color. And I felt so uncomfortable. And maybe this was in my own head. I was scared, not for my safety, but I mean, like, I
Right.
was nervous. And I'll never forget one of the things that the professors did was they would make us read the questions out loud.
Yeah.
It's like like when sometimes when they make you read the question out loud, there's like that stereotype when you don't know how to read.
Right, right, right.
I was stuttering. It was like I didn't know how to read, and I'm like, oh,
Ah,
I'm like fitting the stereotype. Like, it was so bad. I was so nervous, and I got in my own head, and I'm like, if this what law school is going to be like, am I going to make it? Like, I may be one of the very few people of color in law school, and I'm not as smart as these other people. It was really bad, and I almost considered not going just because of that experience. But I scored, I would say average, pretty average on the LSAT, and I got into UMass Law, School of Law. I was the recipient of a pretty good scholarship, and I went anyway. So, but I knew the whole time I wanted to go to law school.
well, that's great. And I could once again, I'm probably going to say this a number of times throughout the conversation. I can relate to how you're feeling. I did great in undergraduate school, but once I made the decision to go to law school, because I did so well in undergraduate school, I don't know, I guess I took it for granted that I would fly through in law school as well. And I went to school at night, and I got caught up in a eye-opening situation on the first evening of law school when I was sitting there with, I think, 7,500 people in contracts. And the professor, I mean, I write about this in my book, the professor called on the student next to me, and she said that she wasn't prepared. This was the first night. And I said, wow, that's great. Because he's never going to, how could he call on me, the person right next to her? He's probably going to call one of the other 100 people that was sitting there. And I said, I'll just say what she said. She's not prepared, and then he'll move on. And he called my name. He said, Neal Goldstein. I thought I was going to vomit. That's how I said, this is a nightmare. And when I said the same thing that she said, this time he didn't let it go. And he started lecturing me in front of everybody about responsibility. So I understand how that feels, you know, and to be quite honest with you, it's probably something that's always going to be part of me. But what's good about it is that it's good sometimes to get rejected in some way. I'm not saying that's a rejection, but sometimes it's good to get that moment because you now have the ability to recover, right? You get rejected and then you recover. And so I'm really happy about that I went through that because the rest of the year I was always prepared, especially for his class. So I
Right.
get it. I get it. And so did you have, did you have relationships in law school with other students? Did you have any kind of like study groups? Did you meet people? Are you still friendly with anybody from law school?
Of course, yeah. I think that's really what got me through law school was the relationships that I made there. A lot of the people who I met there were also nice students because I was a nice student. Were you a nice student?
I was always a nice guy.
Oh,
I thought you said nice. I thought you said nice. Yeah, I was always not yes, I was always a nice student, and it was not easy. Not easy at all. Because
yeah,
I didn't get home till 11 o'clock at night, and then I had to get up the next day to go to work in the morning.
yeah. So I can relate to that. It was the same for me. So I still worked in Boston, and my school was in Dartmouth. And so to put that in perspective, it was about a 2.5 hour drive from my job to the school, and I was going 3 days a week. So yeah, but then
So you drove 2.5 hours, 3 days a week, 2.5 hours to school, and then 2.5 hours back?
no, no. So I'll clarify. So it was 2.5 hours, 2 nights a week to school, and then 1 hour back home because because of the time that I had to be in class at night, the traffic was so bad it would take 2.5 hours to get there.
Wow.
And when we got out around 10 o'clock, it was about 1 hour commute back home.
Wow.
And then the third day was on a Saturday in the morning. So that commute was very quick. It was an hour there and an hour back. But yeah, I did that. And so a lot of the students who I met in law school, they all had very similar situations, very similar commutes. And so we just kind of created this, you would think that I would have had a smaller group of friends, but we all just rallied around each other. We had a cohort. So there were about 20 of us in a classroom. And then eventually, you know how 1L weeds out a lot of people, eventually
Sure.
about 12 of us in the classroom.
Sure.
And we all moved as a cohort, and the 12 of us, I mean, till this day, I have many of them refer me cases. I don't think any of them do personal injury. So I was actually looking at one of them. Her and I were just snapping earlier, like about 10 minutes, snapping each other on Snapchat, 10 minutes before I got on. Yeah, we're still friendly, most of us. And the other ones, some of us that don't speak often, it's because they're out of state. But yeah, I mean, that's what gets you through, right? Relationships is what gets
Yeah.
you through.
Well, yep. That's what we're all about here. You said, I think I read somewhere, or I don't think you told me this, but you might have. But I know you said that you gave birth to twins in your last semester of law school. So that in itself deserves a standing ovation. But honestly, how do you do it? How does that? I guess you can give advice, counsel to people that are going to law school and also have other major responsibilities. I mean, forget about a job, but now you also have twins. So how did you do that?
Well, if you want my advice, don't have twins in law school.
Yes, well,
That's my that's my real advice. But it's funny because we talk about those relationships. It's my peers. They threw me a baby shower and
Wow.
library.
Wow.
I love them. But yeah, so all right, so I turned 30 in law school, and I had just bought a house, and I was scared. I was like, all right, well, I'm 30 years old, and I don't know if my son is going to take care of me when I get old. He's probably going to throw me into an old people home. I was like, so I said to my ex-husband at the time, I said, maybe we should like try for another one. And he agreed, and boom, twins. What
Wow.
was I thinking? Anyway, so and it was like immediate because I thought, 30-year-old, you got to try for a couple years.
Yeah.
So it was immediate. So I get pregnant with twins, and I give birth to them my third year of law school. Actually, it was like 4L because, night students were like,
Right.
we do 4 years. So I'll never forget the day after I gave birth to the twins, I had to hand in a 60-page paper. Yes,
Wow.
because it was like one of those classes where in lieu of taking a class, you do an independent research paper.
Right.
And I did that so that I wouldn't have to actually commute to and from school because one of the triggers that I had that made me like absolutely nauseous during my pregnancy was the smell of my car. So that commute was not helpful. Decided instead of taking a class that semester, I was going to do that paper, which backfired because the final draft was due the day after I had the twins. And my professor was not budging.
Wow.
So I gave birth to the twins, no C-section, and then I handed in my paper the next day. So
Oh,
laptop, yeah.
wow. Talk about focus, man. I mean, that's unbelievable.
For what it's worth, it was pretty much done before I gave birth. I just had
Right.
to fix a couple
Right. Well,
citations.
still, in the days leading up to your delivery, you obviously had the right focus there.
Yeah.
So you said that you were a paralegal for a while,
Mhm.
right? How long were you a paralegal for?
About 12 years before I finished law school.
Right. So how did the years that you were a paralegal and you became quite acquainted with law office procedures and systems and clients and the court system, how did that help you? And do you think it gave you an edge when you finally got out of law school and you were looking for a job?
Yes, actually. Well, obviously, it gives you an edge, because when firms are looking to hire, they want someone with experience, and it kind of like sucks. Can I say that word?
Yes, you can. You could say other words too. Go ahead.
So don't get me started, okay? It kind of sucks because if you think about it, people spend their entire lives in school. They don't really prioritize getting that experience. And then you get out and then everyone's looking for experience. So, yes, I mean, I had an edge having that experience. But I will say this, and this is where I think you and we see things very similarly. And this is what I love about you so much too, is because we understand how important relationship building with clients is. And that is something that I think I would not understand as much if I wasn't a paralegal for 12 years. I had to take calls, and this is again not a dig to the attorney that I worked for so long because I love him and he's my family, like,
Right.
and his
Right.
family, is my family.
Right.
But of course, it can be difficult when you have so many clients to have that kind of relationship with all of them. And I would be the one taking the calls, and the clients would be upset that they weren't getting calls back for certain clients would. And I would hear those complaints, whether they weren't receiving calls back, and I would hear exactly what it was that they needed. And if a client would go to another attorney, I would know why. So it was almost like I had the benefit of getting this data and compartmentalizing it over 12 years. So when I became an attorney, I knew what was needed, what clients wanted, what they prioritized, and I knew what I needed to do to prioritize the client, what I needed to prioritize in their cases. And you'd be surprised, you wouldn't be surprised, but maybe your listeners would be surprised that it's not legal. It's
Mhm.
all relationship building. One thing that one of the reasons why clients hire me and they stay with me is because of this. This is
Yeah.
my cell phone. They have my number, they call me, they text me at any time. Of course, with reason, right? And they can access me. They want to know that they can access me and be able to access me. And if it wasn't for that experience, I wouldn't even understand that. So,
Yeah. Well said. And you're right. That is something that's common for the both of us, and I'm sure for other lawyers. But the truth is, and I've said this repeatedly on this podcast and others as a guest, that most lawyers don't think that way. They may want you to think that way when they're on Instagram, doing a reel and trying to show you how genuine they are. But most lawyers do not think that way. And that's why most clients, according to most surveys, are not happy with their client lawyer relationship. It's because there's a lack of communication. They're, they feel like they're being talked down to. So a whole bunch of things, which I'm sure you've heard, because I'm sure you've gotten cases from clients who went to other lawyers and that weren't happy. So you're 100% right, and a lot of it has to do the challenges that you faced when you were younger, that you used the ability to see how important it is to be connected with other people and to make people feel like they're being heard and they're being seen.
mm,
So I know that you are involved in the community in a way that I haven't seen from many other lawyers. I know that you started a group called the Leading Ladies of Boston, correct?
yes.
And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that and why it's so important for you to do something outside the courtroom?
Yeah, so my friend and I, her name's Tiana Pope. We've been friends since we were 15, 16 years old, and we both kind of had similar paths. She's a police officer now, and we recognized that neither one of us had any kind of mentorship from women. And that there are a lot of mentorship programs for men because, as we know, men tend to be the most violent, right? So like when you think of like serial killers or you think of like murderers and things like that, and this is no offense to men, but like, statistically it tends to be men, right? And women don't necessarily have support for mentorship because women also suffer from a lot of mental health issues, and there aren't many programs to support women. And so we talked about how it would have been great if we had some kind of mentorship. So we came up with this organization called Leading Ladies of Boston. And that program, the point of the program was to mentor young girls and mentor them in all facets of their life, whether it's, emotionally, mentally, through their education, through very different things physically, whether they need help with sanitary products or learning how to care for their bodies, things like that. And then once they reach a certain age, they then turn around and lead those young ladies. So it's kind of like a play on the words, like leading ladies. So we're encouraging we're leading them to become leading ladies. And that was a program that we started when I think when I started before I started law school, but then we had to take a break while I was in law school. And we've been in communication. We're starting to get more funding for that program now so that we can start the program back up. She's been very busy also. She's just bought a house and, she's a police officer and I'm an attorney. But we're getting back started on that program because it's really important to be in the community. It's not just about what we can do, it's about how we can give other people the resources to give back because that's really what it's all about. It's not just our reach to individuals, but it's how we can reach individuals who can in turn reach other individuals.
Yeah, I don't want to forget because you kind of brought it up earlier. You know, yeah, you were a high school dropout, and today you're on the board of trustees of a Boston art and music school. And let's talk about that again. Community oriented, like I've never seen. So tell us about that.
So the same school that kicks me out for fighting,
Right.
my son just graduated from on Monday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Full
So
circle. Full circle.
full circle. So
Right.
I I am on that board. I've been on that board for 4 years on that school board, and I have mentored countless students from that school. My son was in a choir, or still is, in a choir called the Spirituals Ensemble,
Right.
and they have done amazing things. They've won championships. They just performed at Carnegie Hall. My son had a solo there.
Wow. Wow.
I know, it's just so amazing. And I was the co-chair of the family council for 4 years. I can't co-chair anymore because my son just graduated. But it is full circle. I think, like, how can we get students to graduate high school? How
Mhm.
can we give them the resources? I mean, there's been students who graduated the school already. Like last year, for example, I've been in communication with students. I've visited students out of state who have already graduated, and just to see how they're doing in their schools. I mean, like, I'm just so, I don't know. I tell people all the time, I love teenagers. That's my soft spot, are the teenagers. I love kids, obviously, elementary, middle school, but the teenagers, I love them so much because I see myself in them. We treat them, I always say, we expect them to behave like adults and have the mental capacity as adults, but then we treat them like children when they ask for certain responsibilities. We tell them, you're just a child, you know nothing. And so they're like in this, and then of course you have all their hormones raging, and they're in this like weird spot where they don't know where they fit in. And so I just like to give them this space where they can openly communicate with me and tell me how they feel. And I can just give them whatever insight that I have and just let them explore themselves, where they're at mentally, emotionally. And I love giving back to the teenagers. Like, that's my spot.
Your in your journey, mentorship wasn't an option for you. It was survival. So, what's your strategy for making space for others when you have a family you're juggling? You have to be in court a lot. How do you find the time to do all of this?
That's a really good question. That is a really good question.
Well, there's an answer somewhere.
No, there is. And I'm not quite sure I know the answer to that. I think because I love it so much, it becomes more of a hobby than
Mhm.
a task. If you love doing something, you're going to do it, right? Like, if you love drinking at bars, you're gonna find time to go to the bar and drink. If you
Right.
love, I don't know, working out in the gym, you're gonna find time to go. And I think that's what it is. Even if I multitask a lot, I'll tell you that. So if I need to, cook at home for the twins and get them ready for the next day of school, I might have a student here and we might just be shooting the shit while I'm cooking.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I can multitask in that way. Or Zoom calls are also helpful. Prepared students for interviews that they have via Zoom while I have like a pot of rice on the stove. So a lot of multitasking as well.
The legal profession is built on prestige, and I don't know if this occurred in your law school, but it happened in mine, and it still happens in, I think, in most law schools, where it's mostly about clerkships, big law. Especially in Ivy League settings, and having really polished resumes. You come with none of that, and yet you still outworked half the field. Do you think the system actually wants to change, or just wants to post about it, some flashy reels on Instagram?
I think a lot of it is smokes and mirrors, like I don't care about all of that. I think a lot of it is, you know, it's funny you say that because I think that there's a lot of pandering going on to certain communities, right? Because that's where a lot of the money is, right? Uh, so when we talk about prestige and all of that, a lot of the firms that are making a lot of money, at least in the personal injury field and in big firms, are firms that are getting business from our communities. There's a billboard in High Park, and I won't mention the attorney's name. It pisses me off every time I see it, and the reason it pisses me off is the wording. It says on the billboard, it says serving your community. And it bothers me. The wording bothers me because I always tell my son, I said, one day I'm going to put my face on that billboard. And not because I'm a billboard attorney, but because I want to change the term to say serving our community,
Mhm.
not your community. You
Right.
know, I
Right.
think like there I think people are into the prestige thing. How many cases can I get? Can I get on a billboard? Do I, am I
Well,
competing with those other big firms?
well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you hit a sore spot with me. And, I constantly talk about lawyers and the disproportionate amount of them have this ego that is just, they can't control. They can't control. I was recently, I recently wrote a post about why I don't personally have, and I never did on my website, anything about how many settlements or how many verdicts we've got. Because the truth is, potential clients don't give a shit about that. They
Mhm.
want to know if you're going to call them back. They want to know if you're going to talk to them in a respectful way and you're going to just give them regular updates. Seems to be like a reasonable thing to ask. And most lawyers still don't get it, just like what we talked about before.
Exactly. Exactly. And another thing is like clients can tell if you're genuine. They can tell if you really care. I tell my son all the time, and he gets frustrated sometimes because I'll think about my clients even after their case is done. I've texted clients after the case is done and asked them how they're doing, how their surgery went, because you can close cases before a surgery is done, especially if you have a letter saying that someone needs a surgery. And I remember one time I was at the gym and I'm doing the leg press, right? I don't know. I get intrusive thoughts sometimes. I don't know if you're like this. And I'm doing a leg press and I put extra weight on the machine. And then I thought, what if my leg snapped, right?
Right.
Knee snapped. And I immediately thought about this client that I had that got hit by a car and her leg like snapped and she had to have surgery. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine how much pain she received, like she had and what she was going through. And it's just like little things like that. And I just wonder, do other attorneys ever think about their clients like this? Like, do they ever, when they say, oh, I'm sorry you went through that, is it really genuine? And I think that clients, they pick up on that. They can tell if it's really
Well,
genuine, you
well,
know?
you and I both know that many attorneys say it, but their actions speak louder, right? So, many attorneys have commercials on in the morning, as I'm sure you know, that talk about, we'll get to you in 24 hours. We're not going to take a fee unless we get money for you. We care about you. We love you. And it's all the same bullshit that nobody wants to hear. Of course, why would you say things that everybody says that all of us agree on? Of course you care about your clients. Of
Right.
course you're not going to take a fee unless you give them something. You think the potential clients that are watching that commercial don't know that already? So it's really pretty stupid. I know that you do expungement work, correct? Did I
No,
say that wrong? You
no.
don't?
So I help people seal their records, not expunge,
Oh,
because
okay.
it's a different process, but I
Right.
I connect them with someone else who can help them expunge their
But
record.
I know you do civil rights work. I know you do personal injury work. I don't
Yes.
know if you do educational work, but I thought you did. Is there a through line between all of them? Do you find something common amongst all of those disciplines?
Yeah, so before I did personal injury as an attorney, I worked at a legal aid firm doing special education law. And
Right.
obviously I got into that because of my son. And I just have a soft spot for that.
Sure.
And as far as the civil rights stuff, I took on a couple of cases regarding it was more of an employment thing, discrimination, but there was a little bit of a not personal injury, but like a tort component to it,
Right. Right.
defamation of character, because I needed some kind of tort in there for obvious reasons. And I still do some special ed stuff on a pro bono basis. So, but that was, mostly through the school. So, for example, there was a student who was being removed from the school because of a homelessness issue, and I helped that child pro bono. And I help other kids with their IEPs and stuff. And I do all of that pro bono because I just can't help it. But that has absolutely nothing to do with personal injury. We're actually, Combies Hanson, the firm that I work for, we're actually one of the few firms that go after school districts. A lot of firms don't like to do it because sometimes there's conflict of interest.
Right.
We have I know you're in New York, but we have the Mass Tort Claims Act, which, puts a cap on, and I'm not sure if New York has this, puts a cap on how much you can sue a school district for. I mean, there's definitely like, loopholes to that and
Right,
different, it, you
right,
know, obviously there's different ways that you can get around it, but it's tough. But we go after school districts a lot.
right. So as we start winding down here, you've said that nobody should be defined by their worst mistake, but the legal system isn't always forgiving. What needs to change is we need to treat redemption a bit different. And so, how can young lawyers be part of that shift?
Well, first of all, number one, we need to look at ourselves, right? And stop judging people because you're never going to help someone shift, right? Or even we're not going to change society until we can change our own view, right?
Sure.
So many people could have been in my shoes if they got caught. Let's
Hmm.
just be honest. Let's keep it real, right?
Right, right,
Multiple times. That's why I have some felonies, right?
right.
Earlier you said I have a felony. Wrong. I have multiple felonies.
Okay.
I got caught, right? So I think that's the first thing, right? Is we put ourselves in the shoes of other people, okay? And then once we shift our own mindset, that's when we can really truly help other people, whether it's giving them resources, whether it's providing our own help, we can either help people pro bono or give them the name and number of someone else, whether we can reduce our fees in other ways. I mean, there's so many ways. Attorneys, I feel like we have a social responsibility, and I
Sure.
and I think it. I think our founding fathers in this country know that we have a social responsibility to help, the I don't know what we call the citizens of this country and non-citizens of this country. So as long as we do our part, whether it's helping either, one or two people a year, I think we really need to start practicing that. And if we can't, if we don't have the time to do it, because let's be honest, we can be really busy, there's other ways that we can support, whether it's financially. And again, some of us don't even have those means, because we're running our own businesses and we're very tight, whether it's sharing on social media, sharing flyers, whether it's attending events and taking pictures and sharing that on social media because now we're advertising those nonprofit organizations. I mean, there are so many different ways that we can help, but we definitely have a social responsibility to help uplift our community and specifically those who need that redemption.
All right, Stephanie, before we wrap, I always ask our guests three final questions, and they're straightforward and give it a second to think about it. And then I'd love your answers. And I know you're one of the younger attorneys we've had on the show, but your story is one of the most powerful. And I'm being straightforward with you. So I'm really curious how you're going to answer these. If you can go back and talk to your younger self, not the law student version, the version of you holding a newborn baby, what would you say to her?
Man, that's tough. Man, that's a really tough question. What would I say to her? I would tell her to this is not going to be as exciting as you think.
That's okay. That's
I'm going to be
okay.
honest with you. It's not going to be like a beautiful, powerful message.
That's okay. Whatever it is, it is.
I tell her to save more money.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. I don't think anybody has said that. And that's great because I've said that to my younger self.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, I can't make that happen anymore. But
yeah,
yeah, that's a great piece of advice.
yeah,
Uh, don't put that one down. That's a great
yeah.
piece of advice.
Mhm.
Two, is there someone that you've lost or maybe someone who doubted you that you wish you could see now? And if you could, what would you say to them?
Someone who I've lost or someone who's doubted me. Man, these are tough questions.
It's for a tough woman.
Wow. Okay. So my grandmother passed away when when I just finished the paralegal program. She didn't doubt me or anything, but this was before I had the twins.
Right.
My grandmother is the only one in my family who had twins. So it's interesting because I ended up having twins and I ended up going to law school. So if I could see her now, I would say, obviously, I would say to her, thank you. Because if it wasn't for her stepping in and helping to raise me and my sisters, I don't think my mom would have had the resources to help us get through, to stay in Boston and to get through school or to even have food. So I
Right.
mean, just say thank you to her.
That's great. That's great. I love that, especially because my grandmother was extremely special to me as well. Last one. A lot of young lawyers think they need to have the perfect resume to stand out, but you've shown that being that one lawyer is more than just credentials. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to build a reputation that actually matters?
Be yourself. Be yourself. Don't try to fit in. Don't be weird. Be yourself, because yourself is always going to be special, and people are going to come to you because they're going to be jealous that they can't be themselves either.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you on that. I mean, I can't say enough how if you stop looking at, swiping to the right or to the left or looking at one reel over another and say, oh, how come they're all doing so great and I'm not doing that great? Close your eyes, because guess what? They're thinking the same way. Don't judge by reels alone. Stephanie, if anybody wants to contact you or connect with you, how could they do that?
So first, you can either contact me on my phone. My phone number is 857-352-8687. You can reach out to me on social media. My Instagram is at Steph, STEPH _ is _ Nina, NINA. Or you can go on our website, because I'm at Combies Hansen, and that's Combies. It's www.combieshanson.com, which is COMBIESHANSON.com.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
If something here hits home for you, don't keep it to yourself. Tap subscribe, drop a comment, and share this with a lawyer who needs to really hear it. This is That One Lawyer Podcast. See you next time.